Hi guys, welcome to your screencast for tomorrow's lesson. So what we're moving on to is ergogenic aids. So we're going to be looking at the potential benefits and risks of ergogenic aids. Now next slide I'm going to explain what an ergogenic aid is. Okay, so ergogenic aids are groups of substances, products or regimes that can be manipulated to improve performance. I think this is really kind of hot topic at the moment. I don't know if you've heard about Bradley Wiggins and the government findings coming out with regards to him and the fact that they are saying that he took performance enhancing drugs the year he won the Tour de France. So it's, as I said, it's quite an interesting topic this is. So as we're going to go through this, you're going to see basically the benefits and the risks of taking ergogenic aids, which are products that help improve performance. Okay, now before we get started on what we're actually going to be doing today, i.e. the different ergogenic aids are available, we need to be aware that we've got the World Anti-Doping Association, which is known as WADA, and this is basically a group that wants to promote doping-free sport throughout the world of athletics, cycling, the world of sport. So the drugs that we go for, the ergogenic aids, I should say, that we go through today, we're going to see in the top right-hand corner whether or not they're illegal or legal by the WADA prohibited substances list. Okay. So first of all, you've got three different types of ergogenic aids we're going to go through today. So first of all, we're going to go through pharmacological aids. So these are drug-based, and these are mostly illegal. So pharmacological, you're thinking pharmaceuticals. Okay, so drug-based ergogenic aids, they're mostly illegal. Then we're going to go through physiological aids, which are used to increase body's adaptation and speed. And then finally, nutritional aids, so food, drink, and supplement based. We will not be going through nutritional aids throughout this screencast. We're going to be doing pharmacological and physiological aids. So we're going to do three pharmacological aids to begin with. The first one we're going to be looking at is anabolic steroids. Okay, so anabolic steroids, they are illegal in regards to the WADA, and there is synthetic hormones resembling testosterone to promote protein synthesis and growth. So anabolic essentially does mean kind of growth. Okay, so when we're talking about anabolic steroids, we're looking at the hormone resembling testosterone. It can be taken in capsule format, it can be injected. So the benefits of anabolic steroids, you've got increased muscle mass and strength, increased speed of recovery, and increased intensity and duration of training. Now, the kind of sports that are associated with the use of anabolic steroids, it's maximum explosive strength-based performers, so sprinters, throwers, baseball, rugby players, etc. They'll all use kind of anabolic steroids to help increase performance. Dwayne Chambers is a famous sprinter that actually was banned through the use of taking anabolic steroids. The risks: irritability, aggression, and mood swings. So aggression, you might have heard of roid rage before. It's a term used in American football over in the States. There's been high-profile cases of certain athletes potentially doing stupid things, I should say, more than stupid things, under the influence of anabolic steroids. Also, liver damage and potential heart failure is a risk, which is obviously a severe risk and complication with regards to taking anabolic steroids. And then finally, kind of like a lesser risk would be acne and hormonal disturbances. So you get kind of like typically acne on the back in kind of like a triangular form at the top of your back. So they're the risks of anabolic steroids. That's one of the pharmacological aids that we're going to be looking at. The next one is erythropoietin or EPO. You can refer to it as EPO, that's absolutely fine. Again, this is illegal by WADA. Now, erythropoietin itself is actually a naturally produced hormone. It's responsible for the production of red blood cells. Red blood cells carry hemoglobin. Hemoglobin carries oxygen. The more red blood cells we have, the more oxygen transportation we're going to have, etc. So what we're interested in is this synthetic copy, which is known as a recombinant erythropoietin or RHEPO. And this can be supplemented to increase red blood cell production. So benefits: increased red blood cells and hemoglobin, increased oxygen transport and aerobic capacity, increased intensity and duration of performance before fatigue. So the type of athletes that are going to be looking at using EPO are going to be your endurance athletes, such as your marathon runners, triathletes, and the Tour de France. Now, it is a bit of an endemic in the Tour de France. Like, a lot of athletes have been done for using erythropoietin within the Tour de France. And as I've said here, this is prohibited in and out of competitions by WADA. So risks: increased blood viscosity. Okay, so it can lead to hyperviscosity. So this is thick and sticky blood, which basically flows slowly, which will decrease cardiac output. So this should actually be decreasing cardiac output here, not increasing. So if you can make that change, that's just a typo. You have increased risk of blood clots and heart failure. And you also have decreased natural production of EPO. So if you actually start to take recombinant EPO, it actually decreases the natural production of EPO itself. So they're the risks of erythropoietin. And the type of athletes that are going to be taking them are endurance athletes. And here's Lance Armstrong on the right, who's riddled with drugs, or was, I should say. So next one, human growth hormone is what we're going to be looking at for the last pharmacological aids. And again, WADA, it is classed as illegal. It's a synthetic product copying naturally produced growth hormone, and it normally declines with age. So again, as you can see, there's quite a lot of benefits. There's also risks with regards to human growth hormone as well. So increased muscle mass and strength, so you've got a faster recovery. Increased fat metabolism, decreased fat mass. Increased blood glucose levels, more energy. Increased speed of recovery. Increased intensity and duration of training. And then with regards to your risks, you have abnormal bone and muscle development, enlarged vital organs, potentially to organ failure. So your vital organs literally enlarge with taking human growth hormone. And then finally, developing diabetes, as well as certain cancers as well. Now, again, this type of drug is associated with maximal explosive strength-based performers. So you've got your powerlifters, bodybuilders, sprinters, and throwers. They're the type of athletes that are going to be taking human growth hormone. So we need to be aware of that. And once again, as I said, it's illegal with regard to the WADA. So now we're going to go on to physiological aids. Okay, so physiological aids, as I explained on the previous couple of slides, this is a group of ergogenic aids that are used to increase the rate of adaptation by the body to increase performance. So the first one we're going to be going through is blood doping. Okay, so what happens with regards to blood doping is the blood is removed from the athlete around 4 weeks prior to competition. It's put in a fridge or a freezer, and then when you start to perform an exercise without that, your body rebuilds the amount of blood you have in your body, your red blood cells. So then what happens is, just before the actual competition, inject the blood back into your system, and then you're going to have an increased amount of red blood cells. Endurance athletes use this. So again, the Tour de France cyclists benefit from an increased aerobic capacity and increased duration of performance. So as we have here, benefits: increase red blood cells and hemoglobin, increased oxygen transport and aerobic capacity. Finally, increase intensity and duration of performance before fatigue. That's why it's very beneficial for endurance athletes, and why endurance athletes actually use this drug. The risk that is associated with blood doping is increased blood viscosity. So once again, it's that kind of blood thickening. So once again, what you should have as well is, that means a decreased cardiac output, increased risk of blood clots and heart failure, and then transfusion infections. This may happen if you are transfusing someone else's blood into your system. And obviously you kind of got the transfusion reactions and infections that could take place are things such as hepatitis and HIV. So that's obviously a big risk with regards to blood doping. So this next physiological aid is intermittent hypoxic training. Now this is actually legal, okay? So there's no injecting, or there's no taking tablets. There's nothing of that sort with regards to intermediate hypoxic training. What it is, it's interval training with work intervals performed under hypoxic conditions. Now, what we mean by hypoxic is it's a condition where the body is subjected to an inadequate oxygen supply to maintain normal function. So for example, when you are training at altitude, there is a low partial pressure of oxygen. This is known as intermittent hypoxic training. So a lot of endurance athletes do this. you also get anaerobic athletes doing it as well. So benefits, acclimatization for altitude events. So for example, you had the Football World Cup in Brazil. A lot of countries went out 4 or 5 weeks prior to the World Cup in Brazil to acclimatise to the conditions of performing at altitude, because it's hard to perform at altitude because the partial pressure of oxygen is lower. Increased red blood cells and hemoglobin account, increased oxygen transportation, and finally increased mitochondria and delayed obla, which is the onset of blood lactate accumulation. This is the point where there is a dramatic rise in blood lactate levels causing onset of fatigue. We'll do that obla in future lessons. So the risks, you've got benefits quickly lost when IHT stops. So if you've gone to Brazil to do this type of training, then you come back down to England, and after about 2 weeks, those benefits are going to be quickly lost and you're not going to have the benefits. Motivation is lost due to hard training. The training at altitude is difficult, it's hard, and therefore motivation is lost quite quickly. Decreased immune system function, and finally dehydration. You can do intermittent hypoxic training in this country. You've got kind of laboratories now and facilities used in which you can control the oxygen supply to the athlete, so you don't have to technically go abroad or away to do this. I know that at Villa they've got a altitude training room, so you go in there and they set the oxygen levels, and you can train at altitude effectively. Okay, another physiological aid we're going to be looking at is cooling aids. So you've got, by cooling aids we just mean things such as ice vests, cold towel wraps, and they can be used pre-event for injury treatment and post-event. So before an event, ice vests and cold towel wraps reduce body temperature in hot climates. Injury treatment, ice packs reduce pain and swelling because of vasoconstriction. And then post-event, ice bath, speed recovery and reduce DOMS. And there's Mo Farah there getting into an ice bath. Loads of athletes use ice baths post-exercise or post-event because of the fact it does speed up recovery. So, and again, this is legal by WADA. So benefits, reduced core body temperature, decreased sweating, dehydration, early fatigue, decreased injury, pain and swelling, increased recovery speeds, decreased DOMS. And then your risks, you've got difficult to perceive exercise intensity, ice burns, and they can also hide injuries, or they can actually complicate injuries as well further. So they are your corner notes for your lesson tomorrow if you get those down, and I'll see you in lesson. Thank you. Bye.